Want to stay up to date with everything that's happening on the show? Or do you have a story that you'd like to submit for one of our Listener Stories episodes? You can get in touch with the show via the website at www.hauntedukpodcast.com, on Instagram at hauntedukpodcast, on X at hauntedukpod, or you can email us at contactus@hauntedukpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook and TikTok. And if you want to support the show, you can do it via either Patreon or Ko-fi. Both platforms have exactly the same content, but work in slightly different ways. One of the advantages of Patreon is its sleek user interface, but if you want to avoid those pesky additional charges Apple, Google, and Patreon apply to your subscription, then why not give Ko-fi a try? Simply open a browser window and type ko-fi/Haunted UK Podcast. That's Ko-fi/Haunted UK Podcast, and you'll soon find us. Whichever platform you choose, we're sure you'll enjoy the bonus content. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the episode.
On Thursday, 1st September 1977 at approximately 1 a.m, I was on duty in my capacity as a policewoman when I received a radio message to 284 Green Street, Enfield. I went to this address where I found a number of people standing in the living room. I was told by the occupier of this house that strange things had been happening during the last few nights and that they believed that the house was haunted. Myself and another PC entered the living room of the house and the occupier switched off the lights. Almost immediately, I heard the sound of knocking on the wall that backs onto the next door neighbour's house. There were 4 distinct taps on the wall, and then silence. About 2 minutes later, I heard more tapping, but this time it was coming from a different wall. Again, it was a distinctive peal of 4 taps. The PC and the neighbours checked the walls, attics and pipes, but could find nothing to explain the knockings.
This is episode 52 of the Haunted UK podcast, and in this first part of a trilogy of episodes, we delve into one of the most famous poltergeist cases of all time. House number 284 on Green Street in Enfield, North London, looks by all accounts to be just a normal semi-detached house. But it was here in 1977 that a series of events began which even today divide opinion between believers of the paranormal and skeptics. It's a case that still stands as one of the most highly recognizable and referenced paranormal incidents to have ever occurred. Books have been written about it, Newspapers and magazine articles have been published about it, television documentaries, dramas, and even big-budget Hollywood movies have been made about it. We're, of course, talking about the world-famous Enfield Poltergeist case. A wealth of information was collected throughout the events that pushed a single mother and her 4 children to almost breaking point. Information such as written accounts, witness testimonies, audio recordings and photographic evidence give an incredibly detailed and solid picture of allegedly what happened to this innocent family during a haunting, which by all accounts was presented as one of the most disturbing of all time. But where did it all begin? Who was involved? What actually happened? And was everything as it really seemed? Here at the Haunted UK podcast, we tend to steer clear of the bigger, more famous paranormal cases. But the Enfield Poltergeist has been in the vaults for such a long time that we really felt now was the perfect opportunity to try and tackle it and put forward our understanding of not only the family story, but also the stories of those who investigated it, as well as the skeptic viewpoints and concerns, which continue to drive us forward and do what we should always do as a collective, as humankind, and that's to ask questions and seek what we feel is the truth. So let's go back to 1977 and to the evening of Tuesday the 30th of August. 47-year-old Peggy Hodgson had been living at 284 Green Street in Enfield, North London for several years with her 4 children, Margaret 13, Janet 12, John 11 and Billy 7. Peggy was a divorced single mother who had to not only overcome financial instability but also had to provide a solid and caring family environment for her children. According to friends and relatives, Peggy was a very likable, pleasant and polite person, and to her immediate neighbours, a respectful and caring mother. The children, as you'd expect, had their own personality traits and habits. While Margaret was described as being quite serious and quiet, Janet, on the other hand, was outgoing and confident. John would only spend school holidays and a handful of weekends at home, as he went to a boarding school due to a history of behavioural issues. And whilst the youngest of the Hodgson children, Billy, suffered with a speech impediment and mental health problems, he was otherwise your usual, outgoing, energetic young boy. There was nothing in this family's dynamic that would even suggest that the events that were about to unfold were pre-planned in any way, shape, or form. It was around 10 p.m, and all 4 children were in bed, leaving Peggy alone downstairs. As she went about her usual routine, she heard movement from upstairs, which sounded like it was coming from Janet's room, which she shared with her brother John at the time. Peggy called upstairs, telling the children to be quiet and to go to sleep, but Janet and John replied saying that Janet's bed was shaking, but Peggy wasn't having any of it, and told them again to go to sleep. Shortly after this, Peggy herself went up to bed. The next evening of Wednesday the 31st of August arrived, and as usual, Peggy got the children up to bed at around 8:30 to 9 o'clock. But at around 9:30, she again began to hear noises coming from Janet and John's bedroom. As with the previous night, Peggy called upstairs to tell them to pack whatever they were doing in and to get to bed and to sleep. But it was Janet again who said that they could now hear strange, scary, shuffling noises coming from inside their room, and they were frightened. Peggy told them not to be silly and to get to sleep. Not a few minutes had elapsed when Peggy heard more movement, but this time it sounded like knocking in the walls. She decided to go upstairs to Janet's room to see what she and her brother were up to, but when she opened the door, she found both Janet and John still in bed. As Peggy stood in the room asking what was going on and who was out of bed making the noise, all 3 of them heard around 4 clear, loud knocks. Then, they saw the chest of drawers across the other side of the room move around 18 inches from the wall. They had no idea what was going on or what could have been causing this, but they began to get very frightened. To put on a show of bravery to calm the children, Peggy went over to the chest of drawers and pushed it back against the wall. But as she turned to walk away, it moved again. She went to push the chest of drawers back for a second time, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if it was stuck to the floor. Peggy told Janet and John to get ready and go downstairs, as she went to wake Margaret and Billy. Within a few minutes, all 5 of them were going out the front door and around to their neighbours at 282 Green Street, the home of Vic and Peggy Nottingham and their 20-year-old son Gary. As soon as Peggy Nottingham opened her front door and saw the look on the Hodgsons' faces, she knew something was terribly wrong. She invited them in immediately and made them comfortable as Peggy Hodgson told the Nottinghams about what had just happened. She asked if Vic and Gary would go around to the house and check the bedroom to see if everything was okay. As requested, both Vic and Gary went round to number 284 and started to make their way inside, when suddenly they started hearing knocking noises coming from all over the house. Every room they went into, the knocking would follow them. Vic was a builder by trade, specializing in roofing, so he had a good amount of knowledge about the construction of the houses they lived in, but even he couldn't find a source or explanation as to what could be causing the knocking. He went on record stating,
"I heard the knocking as I walked in the front door. I went all over the house. Just couldn't make out what it was, so in the end I thought, there's only one thing. I'll call the police."
And with that, Vic and Gary returned home, believing that it could be somebody pulling some sort of prank on them. Peggy Nottingham called the police, and at around 1 a.m, WPC Heeps and PC Hyams arrived to deal with the concerns which had been raised. After listening to what both the Hodgsons and Nottinghams had witnessed, the 2 police officers entered the house at 284 Green Street, Enfield, accompanied by both families. But nothing could prepare them for what they were about to encounter firsthand. Both officers stated on record that they heard countless knocking noises and could find no source or explanation. They checked each bedroom, loft space, cupboards, the kitchen, even trying to move water and gas pipes to see if they could recreate the sounds. But nothing even came close. It was a complete mystery, but it was what happened in the living room which would stick with WPC Heeps for the rest of her life. As she entered the living room with the Hodgsons, they all witnessed a chair slide across the room, with WPC Carolyn Heeps going on record stating,
"On Thursday, 1st September 1977 at approximately 1 a.m, I was on duty in my capacity as a policewoman when I received a radio message to 284 Green Street, Enfield. I went to this address where I found a number of people standing in the living room. I was told by the occupier of this house that strange things have been happening during the last few nights and that they believed that the house was haunted. Myself and another PC entered the living room of the house and the occupier switched off the lights. Almost immediately, I heard the sound of knocking on the wall that backs onto the next door neighbour's house. There were 4 distinct taps on the wall, and then silence. About 2 minutes later, I heard more tapping, but this time it was coming from a different wall. Again, it was a distinct appeal of 4 taps. The PC and the neighbours checked the walls, attics and pipes, but could find nothing to explain the knockings.
So the Hodgsons were now faced with not only themselves witnessing strange phenomena in their home, but also their neighbours, and now the police. This wasn't a simple case of one person having an experience and then telling the story to someone else, who would then retell it, slightly embellishing it and then passing it on again. There were now multiple witnesses, some of which had no connection to the Hodgson family at all. The strange phenomena continued to happen, and the very next evening, Vic Nottingham returned to 284 Green Street and witnessed objects being thrown around the house, such as Lego blocks and marbles, with a few of them actually hitting him with force. Over the next few days, Peggy Hodgson contacted representatives from her local council, who turned up to try and offer their help. As well as councillors, clergymen were also contacted, and all of them reported being witnesses to phenomena that they could not explain, nor find any rational explanation for. The poltergeist, which was seemingly knocking on walls and throwing all manner of objects around the house, didn't appear to be shy at all, instead choosing to continue to cause absolute mayhem. It was shortly after this that on the 4th of September 1977, the Hodgsons' neighbour Peggy Nottingham decided to contact the newspaper The Daily Mirror in the hope that they could put the Hodgsons in touch with someone who could truly help them. This was when the events happening at 284 Green Street would begin to generate nationwide interest. The Daily Mirror were quick to jump on this opportunity, and sensing a unique story in the making, they decided to send in reporter Douglas Bence and photographer Graham Maurice to investigate. Arriving at the house at around midnight, both men didn't think that anything even mildly paranormal or supernatural would happen while they were there, but they were soon to be proved wrong. Knocking noises which seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time were heard on a regular basis, as well as objects being thrown across the rooms with nobody anywhere near where they were coming from. Photographer Graham Maurice clearly remembers an experience which convinced him that there may just be some truth in the rumours that a real poltergeist was haunting the Hodgsons' home. He was also very aware that the phenomenon would be greatly increased in frequency when the children were around, especially Margaret and Janet. Graham Maurice stated,
"I thought it was an ordinary job until I walked into the house. I stood in the gloom in the kitchen, and one by one they brought the children in, asleep in adults' arms, and the last one to come in was Janet. Suddenly things just took off and started flying around the room. I got hit by a Lego brick over my right eye. It gave me a lump for a few days. There was a fair bit of force. There were marbles and things left in the kitchen that were just flying around the room. I was watching all of the family, and none of them was doing anything."
A number of photographs were taken by Graham Maurice on that evening, and over the next 2 years, he would be a regular visitor and an important contributor to the whole investigation. But for now, the Daily Mirror wanted a second opinion. They sent in senior reporter George Fallows and a second photographer named David Thorpe. As with both Douglas Bence and Graham Maurice, Fallows and Thorpe didn't think anything would happen and took the whole story with a pinch of salt. Fallows even went as far as saying that he felt it was probably Peggy Hodgson herself who was responsible for manifesting all of these phenomena. But not in a paranormal way, but by way of simple trickery. The two men couldn't have been more wrong, as they witnessed similar strange events as those seen by Douglas Bence and Graham Maurice. Reporter George Fallows even went on record stating,
"Because of the emotional atmosphere at the house and in the neighbourhood, ranging from hysteria through terror to excitement and tension, it has been difficult to record satisfactory data. Nevertheless, I am satisfied the overall impression of our investigation is reasonably accurate. To the best of our ability, we have eliminated the possibility of total trickery, although we have been able to simulate most of the phenomena. In my opinion, this faking could only be done by an expert."
After this, it was George Fallow himself that suggested to Peggy Hodgson that she contact the Society for Psychical Research, or SPR for short, to see if they could send out a representative who would be prepared to investigate the strange happenings further. Fallows spoke to SPR Secretary Eleanor O'Keefe and informed her of what had been happening at 284 Green Street, and the fact that this poltergeist-type phenomena had been witnessed by an ever-growing number of witnesses, including himself and the police. George Fallows was quickly put in touch with researcher Maurice Grosse, who had only just recently joined the SPR after a terrible tragedy that had struck both him and his wife. Grosse had offered his services as an investigator to the SPR shortly after joining, and with his eagerness and determination, he seemed the perfect fit for the Hodgsons. And this was an opportunity that he didn't want to let slip through his fingers. It's here that we need to pause for a short time and delve a little into the person who was Maurice Grosse. Why did he join the Society for Psychical Research? What career path had he been on before joining? And what was his interest in the paranormal and supernatural? Born in Hackney, London on the 6th of March 1919, Maurice Grosse was the son of immigrants from both Russia and Romania. He was brought up following Judaism, a faith that he would continue to practice throughout his life. Shortly after his family moved to Tottenham, he was sent to school, where he excelled in science. His interest in engineering came to him at an early age, and this was very apparent when he built his own crystal radio set. A crystal radio was a device which could receive radio signals but didn't need an external power supply to convert the signals into sound. Instead of a loudspeaker, very sensitive earphones were used to listen to what radio station was being received. After leaving school, Maurice then enrolled at the Hornsey School of Art, where he took up the offer of an apprenticeship in commercial art and design. With these skills coupled with his love and talent for engineering, Maurice was looking forward to a bright future. But the world was about to become a very different place, with the outbreak of World War II. Grosse joined the war effort and served in the Royal Artillery, playing his part in many operations, including the evacuation of Dunkirk in 1940. From 1941 until the end of the war, he was a guard who was responsible for the well-being of Italian prisoners of war. He also met a woman called Betty Yasny, and they became husband and wife in 1944. After the war ended, Maurice Grosse discovered that he had a flair for inventing. A number of his early inventions sold extremely well, and this enabled him to set up his own consultancy business called Maurice Grosse Display Limited in 1962. He's credited as being the inventor of a number of highly complex vending machines, as well as newspaper dispensers, and his most successful invention, the motorized rotary advertising billboard, which is used today in towns and cities all over the world. During this time, Maurice and Betty welcomed 3 children into their family, 2 daughters and a son. But a tragic event in 1976 would alter the course of the Grosse family forever. Maurice and Betty's youngest daughter, who was also coincidentally called Janet, was killed in a motorcycle accident, leaving the family utterly devastated. Over the following weeks and months after Janet's death, Maurice Grosse claimed that both he and other members of his family had experienced a number of strange incidents. A collection of extremely eerie coincidences and psychic events occurred, which steered Maurice in particular into believing that his beloved daughter's consciousness had somehow survived the impact of death. He immediately became a member of the Society for Psychical Research and requested that he be considered for any cases which the Society felt warranted further investigation. It was around a year later that he was asked to attend the Hodgson's house at 284 Green Street. It was also when he met another investigator by the name of Guy Lyon Playfair, who would also play a huge role in the investigation of the Enfield Poltergeist case. but we'll come back to him in a short while. After the events at 284 Green Street had seemingly come to a natural end in 1979, Grosse continued to rise in popularity in the SPR and was offered the role of chairman of the Spontaneous Cases Committee, a role he held for over 20 years. He was also welcomed into the SPR Council in 79 and then appointed Assistant Honorary Treasurer in 1980. But as well as all of this, he continued in his passion to investigate cases of the paranormal, including the Charlton House incident, the haunting of the London offices of the Rank Xerox company, and even the strange case of a young boy who could seemingly influence loud rapping and knocking noises to emanate from nowhere. Although Maurice Grosse believed in the value of scientific research regarding the paranormal, he much preferred to be out in the field, actually gathering evidence, rather than writing case studies and scientific papers, something which he truly disliked. Grosse preferred a much simpler approach to explaining the complexities of the paranormal as a whole phenomenon, purposely leaving out confusing jargon in the hope that it would reach more people and thus generate more interest and study. He continued to work on paranormal cases throughout his later years and gave countless interviews regarding his own experiences with the Society for Psychical Research, as well as having his own opinions welcomed in cases which he was invited to speak about. Maurice Grosse sadly passed away on the 14th of October 2006, aged 87 years old. He left behind a lasting legacy, a talented, caring and gentle man whose concern for the safety and well-being of those involved in the paranormal cases which he investigated was paramount. So, now we know a little bit more about Maurice Grosse. Let's continue with the events at 284 Green Street. A day or two after Daily Mirror reporter George Fallow contacted the Society for Psychical Research for help, Maurice Grosse arrived on the doorstep of the Hodgson family home. Upon entering the house, Maurice was surprised to be greeted by the sight of not only Peggy Hodgson and her children, but also their neighbours, the Nottinghams, all huddled together in one room, and they all looked terrified. Maurice spoke to all of them and concluded that, in his opinion, this could be a case of a real haunting. He was quoted as saying after his first visit,
"I found chaos. The whole family was congregated in the house together with the neighbours next door, and there were a lot of very, very frightened people there."
He decided there and then to take the case on and began to formulate a plan to help him structure his investigation. He gathered together equipment, including tape recorders, video recorders and notebooks, and on the 8th of September 1977, Maurice and a few members of the press from the Daily Mirror descended upon the Hodgson household for their first vigil. Hours went by with nothing happening at all, but then at around 1:15 a.m., they all heard a loud crashing noise come from upstairs. It came from Janet and John's bedroom, and after bursting through the door, Maurice found both children to be still fast asleep, but a chair had been moved at least a meter from its previous position and then flipped over. It was at this point that Grosse decided to increase his stay and to step up his investigation. It was also decided by the reporters from the Daily Mirror who'd accompanied Grosse on that first vigil that they were going to run the story of the Enfield haunting. So on the 10th of September 1977, with the headline of "The House of Strange Happenings," the whole of the United Kingdom began to learn about what had been going on behind the doors of this normal-looking 3-bedroom semi-detached house. On the same day, Peggy Hodgson agreed to do an interview on London-based radio station LBC. But if Peggy thought her day would be over when she got home, she'd be sadly mistaken. As Peggy Hodgson stepped through the front door of her home that evening, another stranger from the media was presented to her by Maurice Grosse. She was Roz Morris, a reporter for BBC Radio 4's show The World This Weekend. She recalled that on that particular Saturday, work had been slow at the office, and she'd been told of a story which had been broken by the Daily Mirror of a haunting in Enfield. Her editor had been telling her all day that they didn't have enough material to completely cover the programme for the next day, and if it remained quiet, she'd have to go to Enfield and see if she could get an interview with the family. Well, it did remain quiet, and Roz was sent to the Hodgson house on Green Street. So after chatting to Maurice Grosse about the unusual events which had been taking place at the house and meeting the children, she awaited the arrival of Peggy. Roz said that she found Peggy Hodgson to be very polite and straightforward, and she was incredibly helpful and informative when being interviewed. Roz was even allowed to interview all 4 children, and what she found to be the main overriding factor was that every single member of that family was truly and genuinely scared. Something strange was definitely going on. Roz then asked if she could remain at the house throughout the night with Maurice Grosse to see if she could witness any activity, and of course, Peggy had no objections. Over the course of that evening, Roz was stunned to witness a number of events which she felt were difficult to rationally explain. After hearing a crashing noise coming from upstairs, both Maurice and Roz quickly made their way up to the bedroom of Janet and John to find the same chair, which Maurice had witnessed move a few days earlier, had moved again. But this time, it had been thrown around 9 feet across the room. Roz firmly believed that it couldn't have been either of the children doing this, as there was no sound of movement which would indicate anyone getting out of bed to not only throw the chair, but to then get back into bed before anyone made it upstairs. She also witnessed Janet's bed inexplicably and uncontrollably shake for a short amount of time. Roz knew that she would return to the house, but for now, she wanted to get her story back to the BBC, so that it could be part of the programme later that day. These events, on top of everything else that Maurice Grosse had witnessed, convinced him that this case may be too much for him to take on by himself. So he decided to ask the Society for Psychical Research for extra help. Guy Lyon Playfair had been a member of the Society for Psychical Research since around 1973, and had written a number of books and articles relating to various paranormal phenomena and investigations which he'd been involved in. After completing his latest book, Playfair was scheduled to take a long overdue holiday to take a break from writing, but when the SPR put out a request for an additional investigator to help look into an ongoing case, he decided to cancel his holiday and go to Enfield instead. So, as with Maurice Grosse, let's take a brief dive into who Guy Lyon Playfair was, because he was about to spend almost 2 years at the Hodgson home, alongside Maurice Grosse. Born on the 5th of April 1935 in India to Ian Stanley Ord Playfair and Jocelyn Noel Christine Playfair, Lyon became one of 2 sons. His father, Ian Playfair, was a decorated officer in the British Army, serving in both World War I and II. He rose to the rank of Major General and in 1940 was appointed to the role of Director of Plans at the War Office. Lyon's mother Jocelyn was a successful British novelist, writing 10 books in the space of around 15 years. After finishing school, Guy Lyon Playfair attended Cambridge University, where he studied modern language and then joined the RAF for his national service. During this period, he worked as a translator in Iraq, and when his national service came to an end, his appetite for travel saw him pursue a career in journalism. He worked for Life magazine, as well as becoming a freelance journalist in Rio de Janeiro for around 10 years, and it was here in Brazil that Guy Lyon Playfair got his first taste of the paranormal. He claimed to have had first-hand experience with a psychic healer, Then, in 1973, he personally investigated a suspected poltergeist haunting in an apartment in Sao Paulo. More investigations followed, but it was when he was back in England and answered the call for help from the Society for Psychical Research that he was thrust into his most famous case. As with Maurice Grosse, Guy Lyon Playfair continued his involvement in paranormal investigations after the Enfield case came to an end in 1979. He wrote and published a detailed account of his experiences in his 1980 book, This House is Haunted: The True Story of a Poltergeist. Playfair also took a huge interest in mediums and individuals who claimed to have powers of psychokinesis. He was particularly impressed with Uri Geller and his demonstrations of spoon-bending and mind-reading, even collaborating with him for his 1986 book, The Geller Effect. Going off on a slight tangent here, my own personal opinion of Uri Geller is that he is a complete fraud and has proven to be many times over. You only have to do a quick search on YouTube for James Randi and Uri Geller, and you'll soon see that even when the simplest scientific controls are implemented upon Geller's alleged abilities, his powers completely desert him. His appearance on The Tonight Show hosted by Johnny Carson in 1973 is really the icing on the cake as far as being exposed as a fraud is concerned. Geller rose to fame by allegedly being able to use the power of his mind to bend metal objects such as spoons. Johnny Carson, who was a talented amateur magician himself, took an immediate interest in the alleged supernatural and psychic abilities of this seemingly ordinary man. But Carson had an ace up his sleeve. He was aware that all of the props which Geller was going to use on his appearance on the show were brought in by Geller himself, so Carson decided to get in touch with his very good friend, James Randi, one of the most talented and skilled magicians who has ever lived. Johnny Carson was concerned that the odds seemed to be stacked in Geller's corner, so consulted with James Randi on how to bring the odds back to an even playing field. Randi insisted that Carson replace all of Geller's spoons, forks, and other metal objects with standard store-bought ones. But it was also Randi that decided to throw in a curveball, which wasn't a planned demonstration for the show that evening. He supplied Carson with a number of small metal containers, which were empty apart from a select number which were filled with water. It was then down to Geller to use his psychic powers to try and determine which containers had water in and which didn't. Carson was then instructed by James Randi to make sure that all of the items which were to be used on the show that evening were not handled or tampered by either Geller or his entourage. As you can imagine, when Geller came out for his interview, he was shocked and surprised to find that all of the objects on the table weren't his. Johnny Carson and the rest of the watching world witnessed failed attempt after failed attempt, with a frustrated Uri Geller informing Johnny Carson that he felt pressured by the items and his requirement to perform. He also said that he didn't feel strong and ended up not completing one demonstration. Now, the reason I've gone off on this tangent is to make an extremely valid point here. If a man with the experience of Guy Lyon Playfair can be fooled by someone like Uri Geller, then what else can he be fooled by? This is not to take any credit away or to pour scorn on any of Playfair's writings or investigations into the paranormal. I'm just merely stating that sometimes all of us can be fooled by something so simple, even when the solution is right under our noses. A famous card magician once said, "People aren't stupid. They're not fooled by what they see. They're fooled by what they think they see." And I feel this can be applied to many situations in our lives. We have to be very careful not to be swept along by the hype. It's important to always ask questions. And this is none truer than when it comes to Uri Geller, because even after he was exposed as a fraud on The Tonight Show, he was immediately booked to appear on The Merv Griffin Show. His stardom continued to take off because the hype continued to sweep believers along. But let's get back to the Enfield case and to Guy Lyon Playfair's first visit to 284 Green Street. After walking through the front door on the 12th of September, Playfair was immediately struck by the strange situation that he found before him. The entire family was sleeping in the same room. All of them were absolutely terrified and refused to go into any room in the house alone, even the bathroom. It wasn't long before Playfair would get a taste of what was going on in the Hodgsons' home. He witnessed a marble appear from nowhere and drop to the floor in front of him. One of the strange things about this phenomenon that both Playfair and Maurice Grosse discovered was that when touched, the marbles were hot, as if they'd been heated up in front of a fire. This would also be the case for any item that the poltergeist would produce from seemingly nowhere, and this has also been recorded in many other similar cases all over the world. Although Maurice Grosse was certain that the family were being terrorized by a poltergeist manifestation, having Guy Lyon Playfair also witness strange phenomena only reinforced his theory. They broke the news to the Hodgsons, describing to them as simply as possible what a poltergeist was, and that all of the events that not only the family had witnessed, but also the reporters, police officers, councillors, neighbours and many others, was very common behaviour for this type of haunting. Grosse even recalled with some humour that at first Janet couldn't even pronounce the word poltergeist and would instead call it a polka-dice. Over the next few days, events spiralled. Armchairs would move across the living room, the knocking noises would continue, and even the sofa was tipped over in front of a room full of witnesses. Playfair reported that many smaller objects such as toys, marbles and cutlery would appear to fly across rooms and even disappear, then reappear in a completely different room. But both Grosse and Playfair noticed that there was always one constant factor which went hand in hand with all of these strange occurrences. All of these phenomena seemed to be focused around both Margaret and Janet, but more so Janet. It's a very common belief within the paranormal community that many poltergeist manifestations are linked to prepubescent children or those going through puberty at the time. Can these huge hormonal changes within the body somehow trigger these phenomena into existence? Is it possible that a regular haunting can be greatly magnified and increased in its intensity and frequency by these changes that the human body goes through? It's certainly a distinct possibility, and this case was proving to be another example which seemed to only reinforce that theory. By this time, photographer Graham Morris was also becoming an integral part of the investigation and had rigged up a camera inside Janet's bedroom. This camera would capture an event that still divides opinion about what was actually happening. Morris had run a cable downstairs and into the kitchen, enabling him to remotely operate the camera when required. One evening, after hearing a disturbance upstairs, Morris activated the camera and took a series of photographs. At the time, Billy was sharing a bed with his sister Margaret, and John had gone back to boarding school. Upon entering the bedroom, Maurice Grosse found Janet on the floor on the opposite side of the room from her bed. Margaret, Billy and Janet were terrified and completely hysterical. Still being years away from the invention of digital cameras, Graham Morris had to get the film developed and wait. When the photos came back the next day, they showed Janet in bed in a prone position. Then as the photographs progressed, she is seen being lifted up off the bed and thrown across the room. Both Graham Morris and Maurice Grosse believed that these images represented proof of levitation, but others weren't so sure. When these images were published, with the most famous one showing Janet a number of feet off the floor and seemingly levitating between the two beds, critics simply said that this showed nothing more than Janet jumping out of bed. Even the terrified looks on the faces of Margaret and Billy weren't enough to convince them. Days went by with there seeming to be no ending in sight to these disturbances. Both Playfair and Grosse kept detailed written accounts of every single occurrence, and they also encouraged Peggy and anyone else who witnessed anything strange to do the same. These accounts included incidents such as marbles and pieces of Lego seen travelling through the air at great speed, seemingly emanating from walls or windows, a teapot shaking vigorously on a cabinet in the absence of any external vibration, kitchen unit doors sliding open of their own accord, small fires starting and extinguishing themselves without causing damage, tubular door chimes swinging from side to side with no external influence, metal spoons bending and the lid of a metal teapot appearing to be deformed, the iron frame of a built-in fireplace wrenched from the wall, normally reliable electrical equipment, tape recorders, cameras, etc., failing to work on multiple occasions, batteries appearing to be drained of power in seconds, knocks, bangs and crashes heard, not caused by plumbing, vibration or any other external sources, a bedroom carpet pulled up at the edge to form an identical shape each time, an effect which Maurice Grosse was unable to replicate. Another disturbing incident occurred one evening when an enormous crashing noise was heard from upstairs. A number of people rushed up to see what had happened, and one of them was Graham Maurice. He said that upon entering the bedroom, they were greeted by the sight of a huge cast iron double bed which had been flipped up and over onto its side. He said of the incident,
"The bed was absolutely solid. There was no way on earth that a child or even all of the children on their own could have moved that bed, let alone tipped it onto its side."
It wouldn't be for the last time that things were about to become too much for the family to take. On the 25th of September 1977, disturbances had become so frequent, violent and terrifying that the Hodgsons left their home and sought refuge at Peggy's brother's house. John Burkham lived just a few houses away at 272 Green Street with his wife Sylvia and their two children Paul and Denise. Relations between the two families were always good, and the Hodgsons were welcomed inside. Sylvia began to help calm them down and started to make everyone some tea, when a very strange and disturbing thing happened in front of everyone. Seemingly from out of nowhere, a Lego brick appeared and dropped onto a table near Sylvia. Everyone was shocked, but it was Peggy, Janet, Margaret and Billy who were the most deeply affected by this, because they knew what it probably meant. It seemed that wherever they went, this entity would likely follow them. The family moved back home, and for around the next 4 weeks, the poltergeist continued with its reign of terror. More incidents happened, more accounts were recorded, more photographs taken, and more people came and went. But the core of them remained: Maurice Grosse, Guy Lyon Playfair, and Graham Maurice. On the 22nd of October 1977, the Hodgsons had a second visit from reporter Ros Morris from BBC Radio 4's show The World This Weekend. After the events of her first visit, she was incredibly keen to see if she could actually record any of the phenomena while she was there. As usual, the poltergeist didn't disappoint. Armed with her own tape recorder, Ros entered the house and began recording. In the space of around just 15 minutes, she managed to capture 30 knocking noises which seemed to be coming from all areas of the house. The walls, the ceilings. They couldn't be pinned down to one specific area. Everyone there agreed that if the children were making these rapping and knocking noises, They were doing it right under the noses of many respected researchers and reporters. It seemed impossible that two young girls could be responsible for faking all of these incidents. It wasn't as if the family were making any money from the haunting, and Peggy Hodgson's request to be rehomed by the council was denied. Again, all of these events were beginning to have a huge negative effect upon the family. Peggy's health was suffering, and both Janet and Margaret were falling behind at school because of severe exhaustion. The council agreed to send the family away for the October half-term school break to Clacton-on-Sea. Even John, who'd returned from boarding school, joined the family as it was an official school holiday. Peggy and the children reported that nothing happened while they were away from the house, apart from one strange thing. They said that a barking noise would occasionally be heard, coming from Janet when she was in bed. This noise and many others would return with Janet to the Hodgson home later that year. While the family were enjoying their time away from 284 Green Street, Maurice Grosse had been busy trying to set up some sort of communication with whatever or whoever this spirit was, and he was having a degree of success. He would start off by asking simple questions, encouraging the spirit to answer using a series of knocks. When asked what 5 + 5 was, the spirit would reply by knocking 10 times. Grosse would then move on to another question. But this would become much more pronounced when the family returned. It was November the 5th, 1977, bonfire night. And while thousands were outside enjoying fireworks, food and drink, Maurice Grosse was to have his most successful communication with the poltergeist to date. Joined by the Hodgsons and Playfair, Maurice Grosse began to ask a series of questions. He'd been getting the spirit to also knock once for no and twice for yes for other questions, and this was the format that he would use on that particular evening. The experiment took place in one of the bedrooms upstairs, and the family were asked to get into bed and place their hands on top of the covers. All of them were being closely observed. The experiment went as follows.
Are you a male spirit? Did you used to live in this house? Was it more than 50 years ago?
The response to this question produced 53 knocks, and then for yes.
Did you die in this house? Are you unhappy? Where are you? Is it because you want to give us a special message? Are you having a game with me?
But there were no knocks in answer to this question. Instead, a cardboard box was thrown at Maurice Grosse from across the room, striking him on the head. It seemed inconceivable that any of the family were making the knocking noises. How would they have gotten away with knocking 53 times in answer to one of the questions without being seen once? The evidence for the existence of a real poltergeist phenomenon was steadily mounting. From around this time, Peggy Hodgson decided to try another method of communication which had been suggested to her by researchers. She was to leave sheets of paper and pens in every room of the house, and then try to encourage the spirit to communicate by asking it to leave her a message. The 10th of November 1977 saw Janet celebrate her 12th birthday, and it also saw another person walk through the door of the Hodgsons' home. Argentinian physicist Eduardo Balanovsky was in London, and being an admirer of his, Guy Lyon Playfair invited him to get his opinion. Balanovsky had studied things such as brain-to-brain telepathy, psychic healing and remote viewing, so had an open mind when it came to the paranormal. He asked if he could set up a magnetometer in the same room as Janet to measure any changes in the electromagnetic field, and this was granted. During the next few hours, Balanovsky witnessed a number of phenomena, including a pillow that was thrown across Janet's bedroom. As this happened, the magnetometer registered a significant change in the electromagnetic field near Janet. Whether this discovery had strengthened the electromagnetic influence of the poltergeist isn't known, but a couple of days later, a significant discovery was made on the fridge freezer in the kitchen. Something had used the pen and paper and scrawled out a message which read, "I will stay in this house. Do not read this to anyone, or I will retaliate." After Peggy had found this message and alerted Maurice and Guy, another message appeared on paper which had been left on the living room table. This time, the message read, "Can I have a tea bag?" which Peggy cautiously went to get from the kitchen. She placed the tea bag down on the table, and it was suddenly joined by a destroyed tea bag next to it, seemingly appearing from nowhere. An apport, an everyday cheap item suddenly rich in terror. Shocked by this, Peggy got in touch with her ex-husband, who soon appeared at the house. She showed him the messages, and whilst it was clear that Peggy was struggling to comprehend what was going on, her ex-husband could offer no real help. After he left, Peggy apologized to the spirit for disobeying it and for showing another person the messages. It responded when another message appeared reading, "It was a misunderstanding. Don't do it again. I know who that was." But something seemed off with this one. Witnesses said that the handwriting was very similar to that of Janet's, but she vigorously denied writing any messages. Events escalated further, with one in particular taking place on the 26th of November 1977. After an incredibly stressful few days, Janet was clearly exhausted, and both Maurice Grosse and Guy Lyon Playfair were understandably concerned with her well-being. Janet had also been falling into what seemed like deep trances, and these would result in her lashing out to those around her, as well as her trying to harm herself. In these trance-like states, Janet would display freakish levels of strength. Such were the concerns regarding Janet's safety, Maurice Grosse decided to call in a doctor to help him calm her down. Janet was restrained and then given an injection of 10 milligrams of Valium, which in a child of Janet's age and size should have been enough to knock her out for a number of hours. After she was placed into bed, the group, which included amongst others Grosse, Playfair, Peggy Hodgson, Peggy's brother John, and photographer Graham Maurice, all reconvened downstairs. But it wasn't long before they were back in Margaret and Janet's bedroom. After a short while, a noise from upstairs alerted the group, and Peggy's brother John was quickly followed upstairs by photographer Graham Maurice. As they entered the girls' bedroom, they found Janet fast asleep on top of a large radio which was on a chest of drawers. Graham Maurice immediately started taking a series of photographs which clearly show Janet precariously balancing atop this radio. But she is completely sedated and out cold. How could a 12-year-old girl, who'd been sedated with 10 milligrams of Valium, get out of bed, walk across her bedroom floor, climb up onto the chest of drawers, then balance herself on top of the radio, all without hardly making a sound? The intensity of events seemed to increase as the days went by, with no end in sight to the entity's hold over the family. Poltergeist cases are a rarity anyway, and they usually burn themselves out in a few weeks or months. But this case was starting to move past those time frames. On the 29th of November, things took a slightly different turn when renowned psychic Luiz Gasparetto from Brazil was permitted to visit the house to try and offer healing and insight. He was joined by his interpreter Elsie de Grasse, and displayed what was described as a theatrical representation of his abilities. He would go into a deep meditative state and would use his apparent powers of automatic writing to produce drawings and pictures. He then performed spiritual healing rituals in an effort to bring an end to the haunting. All through these demonstrations, it was noted that Janet was taking a huge interest in what she saw Gasparetto doing, and shortly after he left, she began drawing disturbing images when she went into her trances. These images were violent and bloody, and they were also coupled with Janet writing the name Wilkins over and over and over again. This turned out to be a very eerie coincidence, because a family with the name Wilkins did indeed live in the Hodgson's house, and it turned out that the wife and mother of the family had died of a brain tumour. Had Janet somehow managed to tap into the past lives of the family that had lived in the house before them? And was it one of these family members who were behind the paranormal happenings? We'll come back to this later on. Peggy Hodgson also revealed that she would get terrible headaches just before a paranormal incident would occur, and on one occasion, both she and Margaret separately described a shared dream which they'd been having. Amidst the headaches and the dreams, another strange theory was thrown into the mix regarding the spirit's identity. Peggy recalled that when she first moved into 284 Green Street, Enfield, the family had little to nothing to furnish the house with, and not a lot of money to spare either. It turned out that she had been offered a substantial amount of furniture for free, but this furniture had come from a house with a very dark and tragic past. It emerged that the furniture had belonged to a family whose 4-year-old daughter had been murdered by her father. He killed her by smothering her with a pillow. This also seemed to go some way in explaining an incident witnessed by both Maurice Grosse and Guy Lyon Playfair. One evening, both men saw indentations in pillows on the beds, which had allegedly belonged to the family of the murdered girl. Could this have been her spirit in the house all along? Well, that answer would, terrifyingly, be given very soon. It was becoming increasingly clear now that the vast majority of activity was centered around Janet, and whilst suspicion was sometimes raised about the validity of some of the phenomena, the majority was still seen as genuine. Both Grosse and Playfair would go on record throughout this case to state that they caught both Janet and Margaret attempting to fake and embellish incidents from time to time, but they insisted, stressed even, that they saw through this hoaxing very quickly and easily. They could deftly distinguish the childlike pranks from this strange raw phenomena. The events were so odd and original that it highlighted glaringly anything bogus in its path. In their mind, there was no comparison between the two. It was like oil and water, a professional and an amateur. The girl's antics looked obvious, like a child's drawing next to the real deal, a crude copy of a masterpiece. The difference was flagrant. Researchers, skeptics, and reporters came and went, and more incidents took place, including one particular one which completely stumped Grosse, Playfair, and Graham Morris as to how it could be explained. A number of times up to this point, Janet had been thrown out of bed, but mostly found fast asleep, with absolutely no knowledge of how she got there. But on the 3rd of December 1977, an incredibly disturbing incident occurred in the early hours. At around 1 a.m., Peggy Hodgson witnessed Janet come literally flying out of bed, crashing hard on the landing floor. This alerted Maurice Grosse, and as he went to make his way upstairs, he saw Janet slowly sliding down the stairs towards him, completely fast asleep. Janet was woken up and questioned, but all she could remember was the sensation of someone or something grabbing a hold of her arm and pulling at her. The strength required to accomplish this is impressive to say the least, but to then see her slowly sliding downstairs in a controlled manner suggests that whatever force was doing this was highly intelligent and seemed to know what it was doing. A couple of days later, at the request of the Society for Psychical Research, physicist David Robertson joined the team of investigators. Robertson was a friend of fellow physicist John Hasted, who was also a friend of Guy Lyon Playfair, and it was Hasted who also recommended that Robertson take a look into the investigation. He'd been sent a number of research documents to study by Maurice Grosse to get him up to speed for when he arrived at the Hodgsons. Robertson would also discuss his findings with John Hasted around once every week, and Hasted would then be in close contact with Maurice Grosse. Robertson was very respectful towards both Grosse and Playfair, as they were the lead investigators, so he would generally try to be as productive and helpful as possible, setting up recording equipment, talking to the family, putting ideas forward for discussion. Almost immediately after arriving, David Robertson witnessed objects moving in full view of multiple people, drawers opening and closing, toys being thrown across rooms, and even large items of furniture moving. He also noted that many of these incidents took place just when an investigator was either leaving a room or had turned his back on a specific area of the house. It was as if the poltergeist was consciously playing games with the investigators. But it was on the 10th of December 1977 that Robertson would find himself playing a huge part in events which would propel this case from being just a poltergeist manifestation, which is rare, frightening and disturbing enough, into something much more incredible and terrifying. Unfortunately though, this is where we will leave the house in Enfield for now, but be sure to tune into our second episode, where we'll pick up on the events on that faithful day in December and continue our deep dive into this truly remarkable and often highly debated case. In the meantime, while you wait for part 2, look again at everyday items, tea bags, Lego bricks, a set of marbles, a chest of old rickety drawers, because you never know, they could just well be instruments in waiting, of something unknown, like a festering entity perhaps, just waiting to make use of them, make them turn hot in your hand, aim at your head, creep across the room. If that's the case, have the SPR on speed dial, a spiritual medium on hand, and an email ready to send to us, because the next person to be featured on the show could be you.